The silence was deafening, not the absence of sound, but the oppressive weight of an unanswered question. Flight MH370, a ghost in the sky, had simply ceased to be. One moment, it was a blip on radar, a marvel of human engineering traversing the vast expanse of the South China Sea. The next, it was gone, vanished, as if swallowed whole by a capricious, indifferent ocean. The initial reports, sparse and hesitant, painted a picture of unimaginable tragedy. A routine flight, carrying hundreds of souls, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, colleagues and friends, had met an unforeseen, catastrophic end. The world watched, hearts aching, as the narrative began to coalesce around the grim inevitability of a mechanical failure. Grief, a raw and universal emotion, washed over nations, a shared sorrow for the unknown fate of those aboard. Yet beneath the surface of this collective mourning, a subtle current of unease began to stir. It was the kind of unease that festers in the absence of clarity, a creeping suspicion that the official explanation, however comforting in its tragic finality, felt incomplete. The news anchors, their faces etched with solemnity, dutifully recited the available facts. Search and rescue operations were immediately launched, a massive undertaking involving an armada of ships and aircraft from multiple nations. They scoured the projected flight paths, their powerful sonar systems probing the dark abyss, their spotlights slicing through the impenetrable blackness of the ocean floor. Each day that passed without a sign, without a single piece of debris, only amplified the mystery, deepening the national wound. The world held its breath, clinging to the hope, however faint, that a miraculous discovery would offer closure, an explanation, however painful. But behind the scenes, in sterile, windowless rooms, a different kind of operation was already underway. The gears of perception management, honed by decades of statecraft and corporate maneuvering, began to turn with practiced efficiency. The story, initially one of heartbreaking loss, was being subtly reshaped, its edges smoothed, its sharp angles softened. The narrative of a tragic accident while grieving was being meticulously crafted, a carefully woven tapestry designed to absorb the shock, to guide public discourse. The public, consumed by the unfolding drama and the understandable outpouring of empathy, was largely receptive to the comforting simplicity of a final, tragic descent. It was easier to accept the narrative of a fallen bird than to contemplate the unsettling implications of a deliberate act, a calculated disappearance. The human mind, after all, craves order, seeks resolution. Ambiguity breeds anxiety, and in the face of such profound loss, the desire for a concrete, if devastating, explanation was paramount. This inherent human need was not lost on those who understood the power of narrative. They knew that a well-placed seed of doubt, disguised as a comforting truth, could grow into a forest of misdirection. Whispers, though, have a way of seeping through the cracks. In the digital ether, amidst the torrent of news reports and public pronouncements, a few anomalous signals began to flicker. Glitches in the official timeline, inconsistencies in the radar data, hushed rumors among aviation insiders that were quickly suppressed or dismissed as the ramblings of conspiracy theorists. The digital ether, usually a cacophony of information, fell into a strange digital silence on Anya Sharma's end. Her London newsroom, usually a hive of activity even at this late hour, felt like a tomb. It was in this hushed, almost sacred space of late-night investigation that the first tremor of what would become an obsession had registered. An anonymous tip, a digital wraith materializing from the shadowy corners of the internet, had landed in her secure inbox. The message was brief, chillingly so, and delivered through a labyrinth of encrypted channels. that spoke of an origin far more sophisticated than a disgruntled aviation mechanic or a grief-stricken relative. The usual parlance of aviation disasters, mechanical failure, pilot error, extreme weather, was conspicuously absent. Instead, the message spoke of vectors and payloads. Anya, a journalist whose career had been forged in the crucible of digital forensics and the murky underbelly of geopolitical intrigue, felt a familiar prickle of professional skepticism. Years of wading through misinformation, of dissecting fabricated narratives, had instilled in her a healthy distrust of anything that smacked of sensationalism or conspiracy. Yet, this was different. The anonymity, the sophisticated encryption, the cold clinical language, it all coalesced into a chilling counter-narrative to the official story of MH370. The prevalent public narrative, the one that had dominated headlines and fueled endless hours of news coverage, was one of tragic, albeit inexplicable, loss. Vectors. The word echoed in Anya's mind, a term more commonly associated with missile trajectories or strategic military movements than with civilian airliners. And payloads. In the context of aviation, payload typically referred to the revenue-generating capacity of a flight, passengers and cargo. But the sender had used it with an unsettling detachment. She began to meticulously retrace the steps of the tip's journey. The encryption was layered, a digital onion with more skins than she had initially anticipated. As she peeled back the layers, a faint trail emerged, leading not to a single IP address, but to a series of proxy servers, bouncing signals across continents like a phantom tennis match. Her eyes scanned the cryptic text again. Consider the flight path, not a deviation, but a diversion. The silence wasn't an accident, it was the point. The payload wasn't lost, it was delivered. Delivered where? To what purpose? The questions, sharp and insistent, began to form a lattice around the core of the anonymous message. Anya's investigative toolkit was a formidable array of software, algorithms, and a deep understanding of how information could be manipulated, suppressed, or strategically leaked. She began by cross-referencing the tip with her own archived research on aviation anomalies. She recalled the early reports of the Malaysian Airlines flight, the initial scramble, the conflicting reports about when the aircraft was last seen on radar, the discrepancies between military and civilian tracking data. It had always struck her as odd that a modern aircraft equipped with sophisticated tracking technology could simply disappear from all radar screens simultaneously. Aircraft transponders were designed to be difficult to switch off remotely, requiring specific overrides or deliberate tampering. And the plane had continued to fly for hours after its last confirmed radar contact, its movements a phantom dance guided by an unknown hand. Anya activated a specialized program designed to analyze historical flight data and identify patterns that might have been missed by standard protocols. It began to sift through terabytes of archived radar logs, air traffic control communications, and satellite imagery from the relevant period. The sheer volume of data was staggering, a digital ocean in itself. She was looking for ripples, for anomalies that didn't fit the narrative of a lost aircraft. The tip had mentioned vectors. She started to map out the plausible flight paths, not just the ones presented by official investigations, but a broader range of possibilities, considering the known capabilities of the aircraft and potential evasive maneuvers. She overlaid this with data on known military exercise zones, sensitive shipping lanes, and areas of geopolitical tension in the region. The hum was a constant low-frequency thrum, the sound of immense unseen power contained. It vibrated not just in the air but through the very bones of the facility, a palpable manifestation of the sophisticated technology that underpinned its existence. This was not a place built for comfort or for solace. It was a machine, meticulously engineered for a singular purpose. Inside, the atmosphere was one of sterile, unwavering control. Walls of polished, non-reflective composite material absorbed ambient light, casting the long corridors in a perpetual twilight. The air, scrubbed and recirculated, carried a faint, sterile scent, a metallic tang that hinted at ionization and advanced filtration systems designed to eliminate any trace of organic impurities. Every surface was smooth, seamless, and easily sanitized, designed to prevent any contamination, biological or informational. Cameras, discreetly embedded in every ceiling panel and along every junction, monitored every inch of the sprawling complex with an unblinking digital gaze. This was the domain of the curators, a name whispered only in the most secure enclaves, a designation that evoked both dread and a chilling respect. They were not a government, nor a corporation, nor even a traditional clandestine organization. They were something else, something far more detached and utilitarian. The processing centers were vast, hangar-like spaces, their scale designed to accommodate the seemingly endless flow of assets. Each center was divided into meticulously arranged modules designed for efficiency and anonymity. The lighting within these modules was a stark, shadowless white, bathing everything in an unforgiving glare. The individuals who had once been passengers were now moved through this labyrinth with a quiet, almost eerie passivity. Stripped of their personal belongings, their clothing replaced with simple utilitarian grey jumpsuits, they were processed in silent, streamlined queues. There were no emotional outbursts, no desperate pleas for understanding, either through sophisticated psychological conditioning or the sheer overwhelming shock of their new reality. A profound sense of resignation had settled over them. In one of the primary assessment chambers, a series of individual pods stood humming softly. Each pod was a testament to advanced biomonitoring and data acquisition technology. As an individual was guided into a pod, a process carried out by silent, uniformed personnel whose faces were always obscured by opaque visors, the pod would seal with a soft hiss. Within its confines, a suite of sensors would begin their work. Non-invasive scanners would map neural pathways, catalog genetic markers, and assess physical condition. Simultaneously, an interface projected directly onto the inner surface of the pod would initiate a series of cognitive evaluations. The information gathered was not stored in any conventional database. Instead, it was transmuted, broken down into encrypted data packets, and transmitted through a dedicated quantum-encrypted network that bypassed all standard communication protocols. This data was then analyzed by proprietary algorithms designed to identify and categorize each asset based on a complex matrix of predefined criteria. The personnel manning these stations, the technicians as they were generically referred to, were themselves a study in dehumanization. They wore specialized environmental suits, their faces hidden behind hermetically sealed helmets. One such technician, designated Unit 734, monitored a series of biometric readings on a large holographic display. The readings belonged to an asset currently undergoing assessment in Pod 17B. Unit 734's attention, however, was not on the distress, but on the anomalies within the neural scan. A specific pattern, a subtle but persistent oscillation in the prefrontal cortex, had been flagged by the system.
Anomaly detected. Signature designation Alpha 7, Pod 17B.
Cross-referencing Alpha 7 with existing asset profiles. High probability of latent pattern recognition capabilities. Potential application in complex data decryption and predictive modeling. Recommendation: Level 3 classification and advanced analytical profiling.
The curators viewed the world as a resource to be managed, and human capital was their most valuable commodity. The MH370 incident, from their perspective, was not a tragedy, but an unparalleled opportunity. A large, diverse sample of individuals, plucked from their normal lives without warning or suspicion, presented a statistically ideal cohort for harvesting specific traits and aptitudes. The processing continued, a relentless, ceaseless flow. Each pod a temporary cocoon, each scan a dissection, each data packet a fragment of a life dissected and catalogued. The individuals who had been passengers were now a collection of data points, their unique stories reduced to a series of classifications and potential applications. The sterile hum, a familiar drone that had become the soundtrack to their new existence, intensified as the transport slid deeper into the earth. It wasn't the groaning protest of stressed metal or the grinding of ancient machinery. This was a pure, modulated resonance, the sound of energies meticulously contained. The journey had been devoid of any external reference points. No changes in atmospheric pressure, no discernible acceleration or deceleration, just the seamless glide through what felt like an infinite, artificial tunnel. The air within the transport remained at a constant, unnerving temperature, carrying the faintest hint of ozone, a sterile perfume that spoke of advanced environmental controls. When the transport finally came to rest, there was no jolt, no audible braking. The hum simply shifted, subtly altering its pitch. A section of the obsidian wall shimmered, dissolving into a cascade of emerald light before reforming into a perfectly smooth, opaque surface once more. This was the entrance to Psalm 7. Stepping out was like entering a different dimension, one constructed not